All right, we are live here with a Schloss rant. December 27th. We're going to get into two basic things, two basic topics. We could go for a lot more, a lot of things going on with sports. We could talk about my horrible NFL picks. We'll save you from that. We could revisit some of the under over, see where we stand. We could talk about other topics with the Giants, but we're not. We're going to talk about two quarterback situations, one with the New York Football Giants, one with the Denver Broncos, and then also a topic which I've been previewing for two podcasts, and that's my full Hall of Fame ballot for Major League Baseball. I'm real excited to go through that and break down who I think is in, who I think is out, give you some stats, some figures to support all those things. But let's first start off with the New York Giants. With the Giants, they announced today that Tyrod Taylor is going to go back to the starting role in quarterback. That means our hero, our idol from North Jersey, Tommy DeVito, is going to be riding the bench, carrying that clipboard as the number 2 quarterback for the Giants. Listen, Daboll's only job is to win football games. In putting in DeVito, when they gave him the nod after Taylor got injured initially, when Jones was already out, I thought that they would lose games. I thought they would lose out. I thought this would put them in the best position possible to get that draft pick, to find Daniel Jones's replacement, because, outside of last year, it's kind of been clear that he's not going to be the guy moving forward. Listen, Taylor got in that game against the Eagles in the second half. There's a little spark. He was able to throw the ball downfield. He had that long touchdown to Darius Slayton. And it's not like DeVito was turning the ball over and giving the ball up with fumbles, with interceptions. He didn't do that. But what he did was he held the ball and took a lot of sacks. And sometimes taking a sack is not a bad play. But when you take all these sacks and instead of it being 2nd and 6, 2nd and 7, because you just take a short completion, when you got 2nd and 17, it's really hard to move the ball down the field and sustain any type of drives. So you go to Taylor, who's a guy who at least you feel a little more comfortable that he's willing to take shots down the field, like you saw with the deep ball to Darius Slayton. Honestly, it's just with DeVito, he was just playing a little too conservative, where you can do that if you've got the 2000 Ravens or the 2002 Buccaneers, and your goal is just not lose the game, or the 85 Bears. But the Giants needed to generate some type of offense. And I understand the points that they scored the other day. I mean, one of those drives, they got the ball on the 8, and the other one was a defensive touchdown. So it's not like Taylor totally moved the ball down the field, but overall, Taylor is the better quarterback. And if you're Brian Daboll, like I mentioned earlier, your job is to win games and help continue building a strong culture. I understand that the season did not go the way that this football team and the fans and the organization wanted it to go, because at best they're going to finish 7-10. Most likely they're going to finish 5-12, which just is horrible. It's abysmal. But your job, if you're Daboll, because you're not going to get the top 1 or 2 pick, is to win as many football games as possible, because should you struggle a little bit next year, you can say, all right, wasn't a good year, but he won 7 games. They could have beaten, if they win these 2 games, they could have beaten the Rams. They could have beaten the Eagles. And that's your job if you're Daboll going forward. And this team is a bad team. Let's not make any mistake about it. Outside of Saquon Barkley, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Dexter Lawrence, there's not a whole heck of a lot of talent on the ball club. And to go 7-10 with the roster, going through 2nd and 3rd quarterbacks and your first string quarterback outside of 1/2 against Arizona, not really being all that effective, a 7-10 record is kind of where you'd expect them to be given those scenarios. And like I said, if you can beat the Rams and maybe knock them out of the playoffs, if you can beat the Eagles, put them in a lower seed, you at least have some momentum, some juice heading into next year, a la the Detroit Lions knocking out the Green Bay Packers. And I understand Detroit finished 9-8 last year, but you're in a better spot, in my opinion, if you go 7-10 versus 5-12. And I understand you get the worst pick, but I think this is a team that's done so much losing Look at guys like Saquon Barkley and Sterling Shepard who've been here for a while, and they've done nothing but lose. And I know Shepard was on that 2016 boat team who lost to the Packers in the first round. But for the most part, these guys at most have been to the playoffs once as members of the Giants, guys like Jones and Barkley. So it's okay to win a couple more games, and you're going to be disappointed as a Giant fan. And you still don't know most likely who your franchise quarterback is. And you hope they take a look at a guy, even if it's in the second round, to hopefully replace Daniel Jones. So that's where we stand with the Giants and the quarterback controversy. If they would have left DeVito in, though, and there was no announcement with putting in Taylor, I wouldn't have screamed. I wouldn't have kicked. I wouldn't have gone crazy. I would have said, all right, try to develop the kid. Maybe he comes back and is the backup for Jones, or maybe is the third string guy behind whoever you draft, possibly, like I said, in the second round. Because, they're probably going to draft another offensive lineman. And this team's offensive line, since they won Super Bowl 46, has been nothing but turmoil, nothing but chaos. But they've invested pretty heavily. They've made draft picks. Talk about Evan Neal. You talk about Andrew Thomas. You talk about Eric Flowers. They signed Nate Solder away from the Patriots. This is not like they haven't invested in the offensive line. Willie Hernandez, Justin Pugh, who's, of course, back with the team since the middle of this year in that Buffalo game. They've invested high first, second round picks, and it just hasn't come to fruition. All right, the Broncos situation. You heard today Jarrett Stidham is going to go in there to replace Russell Wilson. With Russell Wilson, you can look at the 26 touchdowns and say you're impressed. You can look at that 5-game win streak that they were on earlier in the year. But honestly, go peel into some of those advanced numbers, something like intended air yards per attempt, and they're down nearly 3 yards from his 3 yards per attempt from what his max was with Seattle, from 9.9 now down to 7.1. This is a team that's lost 2 games in a row, all right? Stidham last year, while he was on the Las Vegas Raiders, playing against the San Francisco 49ers, the same San Francisco 49ers that a few days ago everyone thought was the best team in the league. They were in the NFC Championship game last year, obviously, and really the only reason they lost was because they didn't have a quarterback to play. So that same dominant defense, he put up 365 and 3 touchdowns in an overtime game. So it wasn't like it was garbage time. The entire game was throw the ball, throw the ball, throw the ball, make plays as needed. He had over 10 yards per attempt as well. And Sean Payton, they paid him decent money. They gave him $5 million a year for a guy who hadn't played a lot. That's a lot for a backup. Or I should say a backup who hasn't, shown you all that much. It's not like it's Marcus Mariota, who's won a playoff game and he's your backup like the Eagles have. Or Tyrod Taylor, who's took a team to the playoffs. So, kind of an unproven backup, that's a lot to give an unproven backup who didn't play. And I think at some point this year, Sean Payton thought he'd move off of Russell Wilson if it wasn't working out. You combine the fact that they've lost 2 in a row. They only have a 6% chance of making the playoffs it was either Yahoo or New York Times. I saw it somewhere. But the real reason behind this is that if Russell Wilson gets injured, the Broncos owe him about $36 million guaranteed. They're going to try to get out of this contract with as little dead cap as possible. Because, like I said, if he didn't pass a physical because he was injured, that money becomes guaranteed. So it's going to be a lot. I think it's like $35 million dead cap next year, $46 million the year after that. So you have to figure Peyton's in this for the long term. But if Stidham shows that he can be the team's quarterback, then it's not a big deal to have that dead cap plus what you're paying Stidham, because it's still right around market value for that quarterback. So the key here is Stidham showing out like he did against the 49ers last year when he was a member of the Las Vegas Raiders. And as crazy as it sounds, though, with Denver, they actually can still win the AFC West. They need to win out, and Kansas City needs to lose out. I don't see that happening if you're Kansas City, but they can also be eliminated from the playoffs with a number of different things happening this week. I mean, number one scenario would be the Bills, the Steelers, and the Chiefs all win. Then they go home. There's like 4 or 5 different scenarios there as well for them to get knocked out. All right, so there's the 2 quarterback stories. We'll take a little break. We'll come back on the other side, and we'll do the Baseball Hall of Fame for 2023, which those guys, of course, will be inducted in July of 24. So Schloss rant, stay with us. We'll be back shortly to talk about the MLB Hall of Fame.